I remember the first time I came to this lake. The air was thick with fog, and the trees leaned like silent watchers over the dark, still water. A pale light hovered above the surface. Not quite the moon, not quite the stars. Just enough to catch the outline of a boat drifting far from the shore. I could hear nothing but the soft rustling of leaves and the distant hum of insects, though somehow the silence felt louder. Somewhere in that quiet, I felt the lake watching me back, patient and endless. I didn't notice the fog curling closer or the faint shape moving under the surface until it was almost too late. That's when I saw it. The dock smelled of wet wood and cold air. Moonlight dripped across the lake in pale, trembling lines. Fog hugged the water, soft and thick, hiding the far shore. I sat at the edge, toes brushing the chilled surface. The lake was still, too still. Even the night birds had stopped, or perhaps I just didn't hear them. My reflection stared back at me, pale and fragile. Then it shifted. A shadow moved there, separate from my own. Static hummed under my skin. Faint at first, like distant radio waves. I leaned closer. The water didn't ripple with my movements, but the shadow, it lingered. I blinked. It didn't. The whisper came then, low and fragmented, a language I couldn't name, or maybe one I did and was too afraid to recognize. My breath rose in small clouds. Mist curled around my hands as they hovered above the boards. The dock groaned softly beneath me, every plank alive with memory. The shadow's eyes, if they were eyes, followed, intent, curious, hungry, though I couldn't tell why. I froze. The water remained perfectly calm. Too calm. It mocked my fear with glassy indifference. A rustling moved through the fog behind me. I turned. Nothing. The world was quiet, except for the lake's faint static hum. The reflection rippled again. But this time I hadn't moved. A slow twist. A gesture that belonged only to the shadow. I reached a finger toward the water. It mirrored me, but its hand stopped just short of touching mine. The chill of the air pressed heavier against my skin, closer to my bones. I could feel it then. Not fear. Not yet. Something else. A weight in the quiet. Something that waited. The moonlight stretched across the water in thin, fragile fingers. The shadow leaned toward me, and I saw my own face in fragments, fractured by its silent insistence. I wanted to step back. My legs refused. A whisper, more insistent now, tickled my ears. Words I almost understood, almost remembered, slipped to the fog of my mind. They were not meant for me. Yet they were. The lake's surface shivered under a breath that was not wind. I could smell cold water, damp moss, something metallic faintly in the air. The shadow paused, watched, waited. The dock groaned again. Or maybe it was me, my heart thrumming too loud. I dared to blink. The reflection didn't. I leaned closer again, drawn by some impossible curiosity. The water's whispers rose, just beneath understanding, tangled with a hum that seemed to echo from the bottomless dark. And then stillness. Absolute, trembling, electric stillness. I could hear nothing but the pulse of my own blood. The shadow, pale and patient, held my gaze. I didn't move. The lake didn't move. Time thinned, and for a moment I thought I saw it smile. Then the night swallowed it back. The reflection merged with mine. The whisper faded. The dock, the fog, the cold, all remained. I was alone again. But I knew, somehow, I would never truly be alone here. The fog lay thick over the forest floor. It curled around the tree trunks, soft and heavy, like smoke caught in still air. Each breath I took felt wet, clinging to my throat. My footsteps pressed into the moss, muted. They didn't echo. They barely existed. The world was swallowed. Shapes moved in the haze, just beyond focus. Tall, shifting, almost human, but not quite. The fog pressed closer. It pulsed, a slow inhale against my skin. Every pulse made the hairs on my arms rise. I called out. My voice felt small. It sank into the mist and vanished. Rustling moved in time with my heart. A branch bent somewhere. Or maybe the fog itself breathed it. A shadow flickered. I stopped. The fog parted just a little. And then I saw it. A pale silhouette hovered, floating, unshaped, It had no face, but it felt aware. The mist rolled back in seconds. The figure disappeared, like it had never been there. I swallowed hard. The damp air clung to my tongue. My fingers brushed the fog. It slipped through like silk. The shapes returned. Closer now, though still distant. I could feel eyes on me, cold and patient. Each step forward made the fog pulse again. It moved with me, inhaled with me, exhaled against me. A rhythm I didn't recognize, yet understood. The scent of earth and decay filled my nose. A faint metallic tang lingered under it, like something old, rusted, forgotten. I paused. Everything was quiet but breathing. The forest whispered in pulses. I felt it in my chest more than I heard it. Another shadow drifted past. It didn't touch the ground. It followed the fog's rhythm, rising and falling with it. I called again, just a whisper this time. The fog took it, swallowed it. A shiver ran down my spine. Cold seeped into my clothes, into my bones. I was alone, yet not. The fog thinned briefly. The silhouette returned. Closer now, still floating, still pale. It tilted slightly, like curiosity, like warning. Then the mist rolled back, heavier this time. It folded over me, soft but unyielding. I could barely see my own hands. I stopped walking. The shapes froze. The forest held its breath. The fog pulsed one last time. A gentle inhale, and then a slow exhale. I felt the outline of the figure brush against the edge of perception, and then it was gone. The shapes dissolved into the mist. The forest exhaled. I moved again, slowly, almost whispering to myself. The fog followed, patient, relentless, like the memory of a dream I couldn't quite remember. I was alone, but the pulse lingered. I could feel it, a breath in the fog. Watching, waiting. The lake stretched before me, black and glassy under a cold, muted moon. Fog lingered at the edges, curling around reeds and rocks. The air smelled of damp wood and wet earth, thick and unyielding. A small boat drifted in the distance. A single figure bent over the oars, moving silently. A pale lantern swung from the bow, casting thin lines across the water. I squinted. The oars dipped and lifted with perfect, quiet rhythm. The boat cut through the lake like a shadow itself. Then it stopped, frozen mid-stroke. The lantern hung in place, swaying gently as though breathing. I leaned forward, unsure if I was dreaming. The figure vanished. Gone. The ripples lingered on the water's surface, slowly fading. But the boat, the boater. Nothing remained. A shiver ran along my spine. Cold brushed the back of my neck, settling into my bones. I could hear the faint hum of the lake, rising in my ears. The water shifted. Something moved beneath, just out of reach, a weight in the dark that followed my gaze, patient and silent. I stepped closer to the edge of the dock. My toes felt the damp wood, rough and cold. The fog pressed in from the shore, soft and suffocating. I blinked. The ripples vanished into stillness. Yet I knew something lingered below. A whisper brushed against me, almost a breath. It was not wind, not the night, something else. The pale lantern appeared again, far across the lake, swinging slowly. Or maybe my eyes tricked me. The water held it just at the edge of reason. I held my breath. The lake remained perfectly still. The silence was thick, pressing against my ears and chest. The boat never moved, yet the ripples returned, circles spreading outward, as though something beneath tested the surface. I could smell the cold water, faintly metallic, like iron beneath stone. My fingers tingled from the chill as I touched the dock's railing. Everything was distant, muffled, unreal. Then I saw it, just a shadow under the water, shifting, watching me, curious, patient, just below the glassy surface. I wanted to turn away. I couldn't. The lantern flickered again, pale and fragile. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw the oars move, slicing water that wasn't there. Then nothing. The fog rolled closer. It swallowed the distant shore. Even the ripples seemed to vanish into it. I was alone again. The dock creaked under my weight. I could feel the lake's pulse, slow and deliberate, beneath the wood. My skin prickled. The night held me in its quiet, in its waiting. Something in the water remained, unseen but aware. I whispered to myself, just a breath, The mist took it and held it. The lantern disappeared for the last time. Ripples faded. The lake exhaled into stillness. I stayed, frozen. The fog pressed close, damp and patient. Alone yet watched. The lake's edge was soft with mud and fallen leaves. Reeds reached up, brushing my arms with cold, damp fingers. The air smelled of wet earth and something older hidden beneath the surface. A rustling moved through the stalks, soft, insistent, like whispers carried on the wind. I leaned closer, trying to catch the words. They spoke names I didn't know, names I couldn't place. They promised warmth, safety, warnings. The reeds shifted around me, a gentle pressure, almost guiding my steps. I felt them against my skin, cold and wet, yet insistent. I paused. The whispers rose, closer now. A thread of something familiar, or almost familiar, wove through them. My fingers brushed against a thick stalk. It trembled in my hand like a heartbeat. I felt the pulse of the lake in the rhythm of its sway. The reeds parted, slowly, unnaturally. A hollow black space opened between them. I froze. The darkness seemed to breathe, deep and slow. It swallowed the moonlight, the fog, even the lake's faint hum. A cold draft slid through my sleeves. I shivered, but my legs stayed rooted. The whispers continued, soft and strange, just beyond understanding. The air smelled damp, mossy, with a hint of decay. Each breath felt heavier, as if something had pressed a hand across my chest. The reeds brushed again, urgent this time, and then silence. The dark space waited. I could feel it, patient and infinite. The fog pressed around me, pale and thick. I stepped forward, carefully. The reeds closed slowly behind me. I was inside the darkness, yet still on the shore. The whispers faded into a hum, not loud, not urgent, just steady like the pulse of the earth beneath the lake. I reached out, but there was nothing to hold, only air and shadow. I turned back. The reeds had returned to normal, swaying gently in the breeze. The path I had walked seemed unchanged, yet I knew it had shifted. I stayed at the edge for a long moment, listening, feeling, waiting. The lake breathed softly beside me, the fog curling around my ankles. And then I moved on, careful, slow, as if every step might awaken something waiting in the reeds. Alone, yet watched, with a memory of whispers clinging to my skin. The lake lay quiet beneath a thin veil of fog. Cold air clung to my skin, damp and soft. The reeds rustled faintly, brushing against my arms as I moved. A light appeared in the distance, small, trembling, a pale lantern floating across the water. No boat carried it, just a lantern, bobbing gently as if breathing. I stepped closer. The mud squished beneath my feet. My fingers brushed cold air, mist curling around them. The lantern flickered. A face, just for a heartbeat, glimmered in its glow, then gone. I followed, slowly, carefully, like walking through a dream. The lantern slipped behind trees, hiding from me. It returned elsewhere, gliding over the water, fragile and alive. I could smell wet wood and damp moss. The hum of the lake pressed softly against my ears. Another flicker, a hand reaching out, pale and still, almost touching the glow. I froze. My breath formed tiny clouds in the chill air. The lantern moved again. It trembled, small and hesitant, teasing me. Every glimpse revealed something different, a shadow, a face, a hand. I followed, heart slow but insistent. The fog pressed close, curling around my legs, brushing my neck. The ground beneath my feet seemed unreal, soft and unsteady. It floated behind a tree, then behind another. Every time I thought I might reach it, it shifted, slipping away. I caught a shimmer in the water. A reflection? Something below? I couldn't tell. The lantern trembled and flickered, mocking my curiosity. I reached out my hand. The glow touched my fingertips. Cold, fragile, almost gone. The lantern floated farther, then closer again. The water whispered beneath it, carrying a faint metallic scent like rusted iron. My skin prickled. The mist moved with every pulse. I held still. It hung in the air, quiet now, almost waiting. The shapes in its glow shifted. One moment a shadow, The next, something like a face, staring. I stepped back. The lantern drifted slowly across the lake, distant now. Its light trembled, weak and small, like a heart under glass. The fog swallowed it for a moment. Then it returned, flickering again, farther along the shore. Each glimpse pulled me forward. Curiosity and unease tangled together. The lake was silent, except for the soft hum beneath the surface. My feet pressed into wet earth, cautious, hesitant. The mist curled around me like soft fingers. I stopped at the water's edge. The lantern floated beyond reach, fragile and pale. The reflections in its glow disappeared, leaving only stillness. I watched it vanish behind the trees one last time. The fog closed over the spot where it had been. The lake exhaled. I stayed there for a long moment, alone, cold, and watching. The memory of flickering shapes lingered in the mist. The lake lay still beneath a pale, watching moon. Fog curled over the surface, soft and damp, pressing against my skin. The air smelled of cold water and wet earth, sharp and lingering. I picked up a small stone, rough and cold between my fingers. I tossed it into the lake, expecting the familiar ripples. They didn't spread outward. The water shifted differently, curved toward me, slow and deliberate, bending like memory itself. Faces began to form on the surface. Strangers, their eyes hollow and fixed on me. People I never knew, yet somehow familiar in a way that unsettled. I stepped closer. The fog pressed against my ankles, soft and insistent. A faint hum rose beneath the water, low and steady. The faces drifted and shimmered. Some looked angry, some curious, all staring, waiting. I could see my reflection among them, distorted, twisted by the shapes around it. The pale light made my eyes look hollow. My skin stretched over something unfamiliar. The ripples moved like breath, rising, falling, curling around the faces. Each movement echoed like a heartbeat in the silent night. I shivered. Cold brushed my neck, settling into my spine. The air smelled faintly metallic, as if the water itself remembered something long forgotten. I reached a hand toward the surface. The water pulsed beneath my fingertips, soft and alive. The faces shifted with each ripple, whispering secrets I almost understood. A shadow passed below, just under the skin of the lake. It followed the shapes, patient and slow. I froze. My own heartbeat felt loud in my chest. The fog rolled closer. It wrapped around me, soft as breath. The ripples curved again, pulling everything inward toward me. I blinked. The faces dissolved for a moment, leaving only dark water. Then they returned, fragments of memory in strangers' eyes, pressing against the surface. I stepped back. The stone's echo faded into the deep, but the lake remembered. I could feel it in the hum beneath the stillness. The water exhaled softly. The faces lingered at the edges, watching, patient. My reflection trembled and returned to normal, though it felt altered. I stayed at the edge for a long moment. The fog curled around my legs, soft and damp. The lake lay quiet again, but I knew the ripples, the shapes, they would remember me. The rowboat drifted silently over the black water. No wind stirred the fog, no oar rested in my hands. The lake hummed beneath me, low and steady. It pulsed with my heartbeat, vibrating through the wood and into my bones. Cold mist curled around my arms, damp and persistent. I tried to move. Nothing happened. My fingers twitched, but the boat stayed still. The water licked the edges of the hull, soft and insistent. Ripples stretched outward, echoing the hum beneath me. I breathed slowly, trying to calm the tightness in my chest. Then something brushed the side of the boat. Cold, wet, deliberate. I froze, a chill racing along my spine. The fog pressed closer, curling over the water, hiding everything beyond a few feet. The moonlight was pale, thin, barely illuminating the mist. The lake held me in quiet, waiting. I could feel it brushing again, soft but certain. My stomach knotted. My heart beat faster than the hum of the lake. The silence grew heavy, pressing into my ears. I wanted to call out, to move, to breathe louder, but my body refused, anchored by some unseen weight. A shadow flickered beneath the water, slow, patient, and aware. It followed the curve of the boat, matching its drift. I reached toward the edge, fingers trembling, the water pulsed beneath them, soft and alive. I could smell damp earth, cold wood, and something faintly metallic. The fog shifted with the boat. It pressed in closer, curling around my legs and chest. The hum beneath me rose, vibrating through floorboards. The shadow lingered. I could feel it everywhere at once, brushing my mind before my skin. The lake's pulse and my own had merged. I closed my eyes. The cold seeped into my bones. Even my breath seemed slowed, weighted by the mist. Another brush, this time lighter, almost hesitant. I couldn't tell if it belonged to water, wind, or something else entirely. The silence throbbed around me, thick and unyielding. I stayed still, listening, feeling. The hum softened. The shadow receded just enough to make me doubt its presence. The fog rolled gently over the water, pale and persistent. The boat continued to drift without sound, without effort. The lake exhaled beneath me, patient and endless. I opened my eyes. Nothing moved but the pale mist curling over the surface. Yet the memory of touch lingered, soft, cold, alive. I sat there for a long time, frozen and alert. The lake's pulse faded slowly. The fog whispered around me, soft and insistent, as if promising I was not alone. The lake was endless beneath a pale, fragile moon. Fog hovered over the water, curling in slow, soft tendrils. The air smelled of wetwood, cold stone, and something deeper, hidden beneath the surface. A faint glow appeared below, pale, quivering, seeping upward through the water. It illuminated a shape that made my chest tighten. Too tall to be human. Its form stretched beneath the depths, unmoving, patient. The water rippled lightly around it, soft and deliberate. Two distant lights glimmered where its eyes might have been, lanterns hovering in the dark. They watched me, silent, endless. I couldn't look away. My limbs felt heavy, anchored to the boat, to the earth, to the fog. The lake hummed beneath me, vibrating through wood and bone alike. I leaned closer. The glow pulsed faintly, like breath, like a heartbeat. The shadow beneath stretched farther than the eye could follow, dissolving into endless depth. A soft rustling moved through the fog. The air smelled faintly metallic, like water-stained iron. I felt it brush my neck, cold and damp, and the glow below remained. The figure drifted slowly, barely moving, yet its presence expanded across the lake. I could feel its attention pressing into me, patient, quiet, inevitable. I tried to blink. The lantern eyes stayed fixed. The shape stretched and recoiled with the gentle waves. Calm and impossible that I shivered. Cold seeped into my sleeves, into my skin, into my bones. The hum beneath the boat matched my heartbeat, echoing through the fog. The glow shifted slightly, revealing more the elongated form, a subtle curve of shoulders, the faint outline of limbs that seemed both human and not. The lake felt infinite, swallowing any sense of distance or depth that I held my breath. The fog pressing around me, soft, damp, alive. The lantern eyes blinked slowly, almost thoughtfully, as though measuring my fear. Every ripple of water reflected its presence. The boat drifted in place, immobile, and yet carried forward by some invisible current. The glow beneath the surface whispered to the hum of the lake. I could smell the water rising with the glow, earthy, cold, and faintly sweet, like old stone warmed by rain. The shadow remained vast and patient, stretching into an abyss I couldn't see. My reflection flickered in the pale light, small and fragile against the enormity below. The glow pulsed once more, soft, distant, impossible to turn from. I felt awe, dread, and a strange, hollow wonder all at once that I whispered to myself. Nothing answered, and yet the shape seemed to acknowledge me. Slowly, the glow drifted deeper, fading into the endless dark beneath the lake. The fog lingered over the surface. The water exhaled beneath me. The lake was still, yet it remembered what had passed above it. I stayed at the edge of the boat, alone, cold, and silent. The memory of those lantern eyes clung to my mind, soft and unyielding. The lake was quiet beneath a silver moon. Fog curled over the water, damp and soft against my skin. The reeds whispered faintly along the shore. A canoe floated just beyond the mist. No oar in sight. No rower. It drifted slowly, gently, like it belonged to the water itself. I approached cautiously. The boards of the dock were slick with moisture. Each step pressed the cold into my soles, grounding me. Inside the canoe, a blanket lay neatly, folded, untouched, warm-looking against the cold night. Yet no one was there. A low hum rose beneath the hull, soft, rhythmic, almost like breathing. It vibrated through the air, through the wood beneath my fingers. I reached out. The water licked my hand, cold and deliberate. The canoe drifted away, as if aware of my touch. The fog pressed closer. It wrapped around my arms and legs, damp and patient. The hum followed, steady, insistent, like a heartbeat separate from my own. I leaned over the edge. The blanket moved slightly with the gentle sway. Cold mist brushed my cheeks. I tried to step closer. The canoe glided away again, silent, untouchable. The hum deepened, almost melodic, curling through the fog. I could smell wet wood, damp earth, and the faint metallic tang of the lake. The water shivered beneath the boat, small waves pressing outward. The fog shifted softly, hiding the shore, isolating me further. The blanket remained, neat, waiting, impossible. The hum wrapped around me, soft and unrelenting. I froze. The canoe floated, patient and distant, beyond reach. The night pressed in, silent except for the low rhythm beneath the hull. I whispered, almost a breath, but it disappeared into the mist. The canoe drifted farther, yet the blanket seemed to remain in memory untouched. The hum softened, pulsing slower, like the exhale of something alive beneath the water. I stayed at the edge of the dock, watching, waiting. The canoe glided onward, and I knew it would never truly be mine. The forest pressed close around the lake. Fog curled between the trees, damp and lingering against my skin. The air smelled of wet pine and cold earth, sharp and heavy. Shadows stretched across the path, thin, elongated, like fingers reaching toward me. They moved slowly, patient, almost deliberate. I stepped forward. The path twisted beneath my feet, turning back on itself. Every direction felt familiar, yet nothing looked the same. Branches brushed my arms, cold and wet. The rustling whispered faintly, soft and urgent. Shapes moved in the fog, just beyond vision. I glanced over my shoulder. The shadows were gone. The fog swallowed them, leaving only silence. The forest seemed to breathe. A soft hum pressed against my chest, low and steady. The ground beneath my feet was slick with mud and fallen leaves. I tried to walk faster. The path twisted again, folding in on itself. I ended up where I had started, or somewhere like it. Shadows reached higher now. Tree trunks stretched like arms toward the sky, bending unnaturally. The fog clung to my hair and clothes, damp and patient. I turned, searching for a way out. Shapes vanished when I looked directly at them. The forest swallowed their presence immediately. A soft breath of wind passed through the trees. It carried the smell of wet moss and something faintly metallic. I shivered, the fog pressing heavier against my skin. The ground rustled under unseen feet. I paused. The forest remained still, yet I felt watched. I stepped forward slowly. The path twisted again, each turn familiar and wrong at once. Shadows flickered at the edge of vision, always just beyond reach. The fog rolled in waves, curling around my legs, damp and soft. The hum beneath the forest floor seemed to echo through my bones. I felt the eyes of the unseen shapes following, patient and silent. I stopped. The shadows lingered, stretching and folding with the fog. The path had disappeared, replaced by endless gray and darkness. I listened. The forest exhaled softly, its breath cold and still. Silence pressed in heavy and unyielding. I moved forward again. The fog parted slightly, but only enough to reveal more twists. The shapes remained just out of sight, patient and distant. The forest held me, alone, cold and uncertain. The shadows in the trees waited, stretching, watching, and the fog whispered around me. The shore was quiet beneath the pale moon. Fog lingered over the reeds, damp and curling around my ankles. The air smelled of wet earth and something faintly metallic, lingering just beyond the breath. A paddle lay on the sand, dripping cold water, though no boat was near. Its wood was slick beneath my fingers, heavy and deliberate. I picked it up. The lake tugged at my hands, soft but insistent. A ripple spread outward, echoing through the water and into my chest. Whispers rose with the waves. Soft, low, almost melodic. They called beckoning, curling around my ears like the fog around my legs. I froze. The paddle vibrated faintly in my grip. The whispers continued, patient and persistent. I dropped it. It hit the sand with a wet, muted slap. But the sound lingered, carried by the fog, carried by the lake. Ripples spread from where it had landed. Each one carried a faint hum, low and rhythmic. I could feel it pressing against my skin, cold and deliberate. The paddle lay still. Yet the tug on my fingers remained in memory. The whispers wound through the fog, twisting and fading in the distance. I leaned closer to the water's edge. The sand pressed cold and damp beneath my toes. The ripples curved toward me, small, patient, and alive. I could see the reflection of the moon's shimmer in each ripple, and beneath it, something deeper, darker, watching. The whispers lingered, soft as breath, impossible to locate. I tried to step back. The fog pressed closer, wet and unyielding. The sound of the paddle hitting the sand repeated in my mind, like memory itself. The lake exhaled slowly. The ripples carried the whispers outward, fading but not gone. The paddle remained cold, heavy, patient. I stayed at the edge for a long time, alone, uneasy, listening. The lake remembered the touch, the sound, and the tug of something unseen. The fog swirled softly around my legs. The whispers faded into the night, leaving only silence and the faint hum beneath the water. The paddle waited, as if it had always been here. The lake shimmered beneath the pale moon. Fog hovered lightly over the water, curling around my legs. The air smelled of damp earth and cold stone, crisp against my skin. Moonlight danced on the ripples. Patterns formed across the surface, shifting and folding in impossible ways. For a moment, I thought I saw letters. I leaned closer. The water felt alive beneath my fingertips, observing, patient. Each ripple carried a faint hum, soft and steady, vibrating through my chest. I tried to read the shapes. They shifted before I could make sense of them. Curves became lines, lines dissolved into shadow. The silence pressed against my ears. No wind, no rustling reeds, just the hum of water and the soft breathing of the night. I felt the cold seep into my clothes, my bones, my thoughts. The patterns twisted again. A flicker of shapes I almost recognized. Letters, or something like letters, folding into themselves, unreadable. I held my breath. The water pulsed beneath the moonlight, slow and deliberate. The fog moved with it, curling softly around the edges of the lake. I reached toward the surface. Ripples spread outward from my hand, altering the patterns. The shapes shifted faster now, retreating as if aware of my gaze. A shiver ran through me. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rain on old iron. The silence deepened, pressing closer, heavy and unyielding. The patterns flickered again. Lines of moonlight twisted into forms I couldn't recognize. The water seemed to watch, patient and immense. I stepped back. The ripples continued, tracing strange, fleeting designs. Each one felt deliberate, like the lake was remembering or speaking. I blinked. The patterns vanished for a heartbeat, then returned, shifting, impossible to hold. I whispered softly, but the fog swallowed it. The water pulsed beneath me, steady, patient, observing. Cold pressed into my shoulders, and the lake seemed endless. The moonlight glinted off the waves one last time. The letters dissolved into silver ripples, leaving only shadow and quiet. The hum lingered softly, fading into the night. I stayed at the shore, alone, attentive, uneasy. The water remembered my gaze, and I remembered the watchful moonlit ripples. The lake lay still beneath the moon. Fog hovered low over the water, curling around the reeds. The air smelled of damp earth and cold stone, sharp and heavy. A faint splash echoed across the lake. No boat, no wind, just a soft rhythm, like a heartbeat carried over the water. I froze. The echo repeated, patient and steady. It pressed against my chest, slow and deliberate. I took a step forward. The mist pressed against my legs. damp and cool. The splash followed, echoing again, impossibly close. Each ripple spread outward, faint and shimmering in the moonlight. The hum of the water vibrated through the soles of my feet. I could feel it in my chest, syncing with my own pulse. I quickened my steps. The echo followed, relentless. The fog thickened, curling around my arms, my hair, my senses. Shadows shifted in the mist. Shapes, unseen but patient, waiting beyond the veil. The air smelled faintly metallic, like wet iron, like something deep below the surface. I stopped. The splash came again, steady and rhythmic. I realized it was not random. It measured, patient, aware. I listened closely. Each echo carried the soft hum of water, moving, breathing, alive. The fog rolled in waves, curling around the shoreline, hiding the trees. I tried to look beyond the mist. Shapes remained just out of reach. Something waited, patient, silent, unseen. The lake pulsed beneath me, steady and cold. The echoes grew fainter, yet persistent, like a memory of something alive. I could feel in the ground, the air, the fog brushing my skin. I moved again, careful, slow. The splash followed, matching my steps in tempo, echoing rhythmically. My own breath sounded loud in my ears, mingling with the heartbeat of the lake. I stopped once more. The mist pressed in. The unseen shapes lingered, patient, watching. The echo faded slowly, leaving only the soft hum of water and fog. I stayed at the edge, alone, alert. The memory of the rhythmic splash lingered, impossible to ignore, patient beneath the silence. The lake lay still beneath a pale moon. Fog drifted over the water, curling against my arms and legs. The air smelled of wet earth and cold stone, damp and heavy. I leaned over the surface. Ripples shifted softly, reflecting silver light across the water. And then I saw them. Eyes, pale, unblinking at first. They hovered in the reflection, distant and deliberate. I froze, my breath caught in my chest. They blinked slowly, measured, patient, watching. I shivered, feeling the damp fog press closer to my skin. I lowered my gaze. The reflection vanished, or so I thought. Beneath the surface, the eyes remained. Cold water lapped against the shore. A soft hum seemed to rise from the lake itself, subtle and insistent. The air smelled faintly metallic, like old iron and rain-soaked stone. I tried to step back. The eyes followed, patient, unmoving. They hovered just beneath the silver shimmer, impossible to ignore. I leaned closer again. The fog wrapped around me, damp and heavy. The reflection trembled with each ripple, but the eyes stayed steady. A shiver ran down my spine. The lake exhaled slowly beneath the moonlight, a soft rhythm that matched my heartbeat. I could feel in the soles of my feet, the tips of my fingers, the hollow of my chest. The eyes blinked again, slow, deliberate, watching me, waiting. I whispered softly, almost a breath. The fog swallowed it, leaving only the soft hum of water and the pulse beneath my feet. The reflection shimmered and shifted, but the eyes remained. I stayed at the edge of the lake, alone, uneasy, alert. The fog clung to my hair, the chill pressed against my skin, and the pale eyes watched from below. The ripples curved and folded in the silver light. The hum faded slowly into the night, yet the memory of those eyes lingered, patient and unyielding beneath the surface. The lake lay calm beneath the pale moon. Fog curled over the water, damp and heavy against my skin. The air smelled of wet wood and cold earth, sharp and lingering. Floating logs drifted in the mist. At first, they seemed random, but then I noticed shapes, figures forming in the silver light. I stepped closer. The water pressed softly against my feet, cold and deliberate. The logs shifted, arranging themselves with quiet precision. They looked almost intentional. A line of them stretched, like shadows frozen in motion. I held my breath, the fog curling around my arms. I reached out. The logs split apart suddenly, drifting away like whispers. The formations disappeared, leaving only ripples and silver light. Silence wrapped around me. The lake exhaled softly beneath the moon, steady and patient. I could hear the faint hum of water brushing against wood. I moved along the shore. New shapes formed in the distance, figures rising and falling with the waves. Each one felt deliberate, yet impossible to approach. The fog pressed closer. It wrapped damp fingers around my ankles, my hair, my clothes. The logs twisted and drifted, as if alive beneath the moonlight. I leaned closer again. The shapes seemed to observe me, patient and distant. They moved with a rhythm I could not follow. The silence deepened. Even the reeds stopped rustling, as though the forest held its breath. I stayed still, feeling the cold, damp air press against my skin. The logs parted once more. The figures dissolved into scattered shadows. The moon reflected off the ripples, silver and unyielding. I exhaled slowly. The water hummed beneath me, gentle and endless. The driftwood shapes remained in memory, intentional, fleeting, impossible to touch. I stepped back from the shore, alone, uneasy, entranced. The fog and the lake wrapped around me, quiet and patient, carrying the echo of the driftwood spirits. The dock waited beneath the pale moonlight. Fog drifted low over the water, curling around the edges. The air smelled damp and earthy, heavy with cold and silence. I stepped onto the boards. They creaked softly beneath my weight, familiar yet different. Something felt off. The dock seemed smaller, or perhaps I had grown smaller. Each board stretched away, then shortened under fog. I leaned over the edge. The lake looked different, broader, endless, swallowing familiar points of the shore. Ripples moved slow and deliberate, reflecting the pale moon. I took another step. The wood groaned and shifted. Then a section vanished beneath the fog, as if it had never been there. The air felt colder. A hum rose from the water, soft but insistent. It pressed against my chest, through my clothes, through my skin. I froze. The dock seemed to stretch and shrink at the same time. My feet pressed into nothingness where boards had been a heartbeat before. I reached out, but the fog swallowed my hand. The edges of the dock blurred, indistinct. The lake had grown, silent and immense, stretching beyond memory. I listened. Even the reeds and trees seemed smaller, farther, distant echoes of themselves. The hum of water pulsed with slow, deliberate rhythm. I stepped forward cautiously. The board beneath me shivered, groaning, then disappeared again. A shadow of fog swallowed the familiar edge, leaving only uncertainty. The moonlight shimmered across the surface. Ripples curved and stretched, carrying reflections I couldn't trust. The lake seemed alive, patient, watching. I tried to take another step. The dock shrank beneath me again. Familiar points of reference vanished, swallowed by fog and water alike. I stopped, breath shallow. The silence pressed against my ears. Cold air and damp fog wrapped around me like a hand I could not see. I leaned over once more. The lake stretched endless beneath the moon, vast and impossible. The dock had vanished into the fog, leaving only memory and mist. I stood there alone with the cold, the fog, and the ever-watching lake. The boards would return, or perhaps they never had. Either way, the water waited, patient and immense, beneath the pale light. The lake was still beneath a pale, drifting moon. Fog curled across the surface, damp and heavy against my skin. The air smelled of wet earth, cold and sharp. A low hum rose from beneath the water. It vibrated through my bones, soft and insistent. I felt it in my chest, in the hollow of my ribs, in the tips of my fingers. I knelt at the edge, hand hovering above the surface. Ripples shimmered in silver, trembling as though aware of me. The hum deepened, subtle, alive, patient. I touched the water lightly. The vibration responded, intensifying, curling around my wrist and up my arm. Names rose from beneath the surface. Names I didn't know I remembered. I froze. The fog pressed closer, damp and weighty. It wrapped around my ankles, my hair, my shoulders, soft and cold. I leaned closer. The hum pulsed with rhythm like a heartbeat, steady and deliberate. Ripples curved toward me, tracing shapes too familiar to ignore. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rain on iron, sharp against the damp earth. Each name whispered beneath the water, insistent, intimate, and impossible to grasp. The fog shifted with the movement, curling around the shore and reeds. I traced the edge of the water with my fingers. The hum responded, echoing, vibrating in sync with my pulse. It felt alive, patient, and aware of my every breath. The moonlight shimmered over the ripples, silver and cold. Shapes danced beneath the surface, impossible to fully see. The water seemed to remember, carrying echoes of voices long forgotten. I exhaled slowly, holding my hand above the surface. The hum lingered, vibrating through bone and fog, steady, deliberate. The names faded, replaced by silence that pressed in from all sides. I stayed at the lake's edge, alone. The fog and hum wrapped around me, patient and unyielding. The water reflected pale moonlight, calm and endless, carrying the memory of voices beneath. The fog lay thick over the lake. It wrapped around the trees, the reeds, my arms. The air smelled of wet wood and cold earth, sharp and lingering. Mist curled over the water. At first, it seemed random, drifting aimlessly. Then shapes began to form. Faces appeared in the fog. Faint, hollow eyes. Smiles that felt like memory, but were not. I stepped closer. The cold fog brushed my cheeks, damp and soft. The air hummed faintly, like distant whispers carried across the lake. They seemed familiar, old acquaintances, though I couldn't place them. Their eyes followed, patient, observing. A voice brushed against my ears. Soft, impossible to understand. A warning or a plea, carried in the curve of the mist. I reached out, the faces twisted, shifting, dissolving with the wind. What remained was only fog and silence, heavy and waiting. The lake rippled quietly. Each wave reflected pale moonlight, fractured by the mist. The shapes returned and faded again, ghostly and slow. I shivered, damp fog clinging to my hair and clothes. The whispers brushed closer, curling around my chest, a vibration through bone. Names I almost remembered stirred my mind, impossible to grasp. The figures moved deliberately, drifting closer, then vanishing with the breeze. I was alone, yet watched, touched by memory I could not claim. I leaned against a tree, its bark cold under my hand, solid against the shifting mist. The faces returned briefly, hovering silent, eyes hollow. I exhaled slowly. The fog thinned, but the memory of them remained. Warnings I could not understand echoed in my chest, quiet and insistent. I stepped back from the water. The lake shimmered, calm and silver. The mist shapes dissolved, leaving only fog and silence. Alone, uneasy, I walked along the shore. The air smelled damp and metallic, heavy with past and memory. The wind carried nothing but my own breath and the softness of the lake. Fog rolled low over the lake, thick and damp against my skin. The air smelled of wet reeds and cold water. Every step I took pressed softly into the mud, muffled and distant. Lanterns rose from the surface, pale and trembling. They drifted across the fog, slow, deliberate, almost alive. Their light shimmered on the ripples, silver and unsteady. I walked forward, drawn by their glow. Each lantern seemed to follow me, gliding silently behind, then fading when I stopped. Shapes moved with the light, fleeting and indistinct, dissolving as soon as I tried to focus. The fog curled around my ankles, damp and heavy. I could feel the hum of water beneath, vibrating faintly through the wooden boards of the shore. A chill tickled my spine, soft and unrelenting. I reached out toward a lantern. It drifted closer, its glow warm and cold at once, teasing the edges of my vision. Then it slipped away, leaving only fog and silver ripples. My breath rose in small clouds, misted against the still night. The air carried a faint metallic tang, like rain on old iron. Each lantern returned, rising and drifting, circling, patient. I tried to follow, steps careful, slow, silent. The water reflected them like a broken mirror. Flickers of light, fractured shapes. They moved, but not in ways my eyes could understand, teasing and elusive. A shadow flickered under the glow, movement beneath movement. I blinked. It was gone, replaced by soft water and drifting fog. The lanterns pulsed, almost breathing, almost listening, but not for me alone. I stayed still. The lanterns hovered, circling, teasing, drifting just out of reach. I could feel them watching, patient and unhurried, their light pressing against my skin like heat and cold at once. Time stretched. The shapes beneath the glow shifted in rhythm with their flicker. I wanted to see, to know, but could not. I exhaled slowly, letting my hand drop to my side. The lanterns drifted farther, fading into the fog like smoke on water. The lake lay quiet, still, carrying their echo in faint ripples. I walked back along the shore, alone. The fog clung to me, damp and soft. The faint hum of water lingered, a memory of light and shadow, following me even as the lanterns disappeared. The shore was quiet, still, shrouded in soft mist. The scent of wet earth and pine lingered in the air. Each step I took pressed into the damp sand, muffled, hesitant. A boat rocked gently at the edge of the water. No one aboard, yet it moved as if breathing. The hum of the lake reached my ears, low and insistent, warm and cold at once, vibrating through the soles of my feet. It tugged at something deep inside, a pull I could not name. I crouched at the edge, fingertips brushing the dark water. Ripples ran across the surface, small, deliberate, carrying echoes I could not place. The boat swayed, inviting, patient. I wanted to step closer, feel the wood beneath my palms. A shiver ran through me, like static crawling along my skin. Fear held me frozen, heart hammering in rhythm with the gentle hum. The fog curled around me, dense and soft. It carried faint scent of cold rain and the lake's hidden depths. I could hear rustling reeds, whispering in the stillness. The boat seemed to wait, silently, almost alive. The water pressed against it, tiny waves like fingers, brushing, nudging. Each sway made a soft creak, a sound that clung to the mist. I leaned forward, half expecting to see someone appear. But the boat remained empty, silent, patient. The hum beneath my feet grew, pulsing, echoing names I didn't recognize. I lifted one foot, hovering at the water's edge. The boat tilted slightly toward me, as if acknowledging my presence. The fog wrapped tighter, soft and cold against my arms. Breath caught in my chest. Every sense sharpened, the wet scent of wood, the faint vibration of water, the silence between each heartbeat. Time stretched, thick and sticky like the fog itself. I wanted to step in, to feel the boat cradle me, yet the pull of dread pressed down, heavy and persistent. The lake hummed around me, warm and cold, familiar and alien all at once. The boat rocked again, ever so slightly. Shadows moved beneath the water, too slow, too deliberate to be natural. The fog whispered, soft voices in the air, urging and warning. I stayed where I was, fingertips grazing the edge. The hum resonated through my bones, low, steady, unrelenting. The boat waited, patient, untouched by time, a sentinel in the fog. Eventually I stepped back. The water licked at my shoes, cold and damp. The hum softened but lingered, a quiet echo beneath the still surface. I turned away from the lake, leaving the boat behind. It rocked gently, still waiting, as if it had never noticed me. The fog swallowed it slowly, and silence returned, thick and complete. The night was still, the air damp with mist. The lake lay flat, black and endless, reflecting the pale moonlight. Each step I took along the shore sank softly into the damp earth. Ripples rose from the water, delicate, circular, deliberate. They pulsed slowly, like quiet pulses of thought beneath the surface. A faint hum traveled through my feet, through the soles of my shoes. Names whispered along the edge of the water. I did not know them. I could not place them. Each ripple formed letters, fleeting and liquid. I tried to follow them, trace them with my eyes. They shifted, twisting like smoke, impossible to hold. The lake seemed aware, watching, breathing. I stepped back, careful not to disturb the surface. The mist curled around my ankles, cool and soft, brushing like invisible hands. The smell of wet wood and earth rose, sharp and alive. A name lingered longer than the others. A sound I felt more than heard. It pressed against my chest, heavy, intimate, strange. I bent closer, fingertips grazing the dark water. The ripples flared outward, responding to my touch. The lake hummed in reply, low and insistent. Shadows moved just beneath the surface. I could not tell if they were mine or something else, mirrored or waiting. A shiver ran along my spine. The whispers grew, layering over each other. Names I did not know, voices I did not recognize. They spoke to me, yet not directly. I tried to step away. The patterns followed, ripples forming paths I could not ignore. I felt like both observer and observed, fragile and small against the water's breadth. The mist thickened, curling into my hair, slipping down my collar. Every sense sharpened. The soften of the water, the smell of wet earth, the touch of cold fog. The lake breathed around me, patient and silent in its rhythm. I crouched, fingertips skimming the surface again. Ripples rose in concentric rings, carrying more names, more weight. Each name seemed tied to a memory I could not recall, a story I could not know. The lake pulsed beneath me, alive in its stillness. I could feel the vibration in my chest, slow and deliberate, like a heartbeat not my own. The whispers moved with it, soft, urgent, ungraspable. I stepped back once more. The ripples continued without pause. The fog wrapped tighter around the shore, sealing me in a quiet, tremulous world. For a long moment, I simply watched. The water carried the names away, dissolving them into darkness. I could feel their weight lingering on my skin and my chest, in the soft ache of my eyes. The lake settled, calm once again. The moon reflected faintly on the still surface, pale and indifferent. I turned away from the shore, leaving the whispers behind, but their echo followed, faint and steady. The fog pressed close to the shore, heavy and wet. My footsteps sank into the damp sand, quiet but measured. The lake stretched beyond sight, dark and still, swallowing any echo of movement. I reached toward the water, fingertips brushing the cold surface. Ripples trembled outward, soft, deliberate, like tiny breaths. A hum lingered beneath, low and vibrating, wrapping around my bones. Then I saw it, a hand, pale and thin, emerging slowly, almost translucent, as if it had been carved from fog itself. It hovered for a heartbeat, floating just above the water. Fingers curled and stretched, delicate, deliberate. The air tasted damp and metallic, my lungs heavy with the cold. I froze, unable to speak, unable to look away. The hand shimmered beneath the moonlight, ghostly and unreal. It drew a line to the water, silent, purposeful. Then it retreated, slowly, silently, slipping beneath the surface. Ripples remained, echoing outward like soft, hollow footsteps. The lake held its breath. A silence thicker than fog pressed against my ears. My own heartbeat seemed loud, overmatching the stillness. I wanted to step closer, to see more, but the water felt like a skin I could not pierce, trembling under my hand. The chill crawled along my arms, climbing to my shoulders. Every sense sharpened. The smell of wet reeds, the slick cold on my fingers, the static hum vibrating beneath the surface, insistently waiting. I felt alone, small, isolated in the vast, dark expanse. I crouched, leaning toward the water again. Shadows moved just beneath the surface, subtle, almost breathing. The pale hand did not return. A soft ripple moved against my palm. The water pulsed faintly, like a slow heartbeat that was not my own. It left a residue of fear lingering in the fog around me. I stepped back, feet crunching softly on the damp sand. The lake reflected the pale moon, untouched, indifferent. Nothing moved, nothing whispered, but the memory of that hand stayed, hovering behind my eyelids, dragging the silence with it, pressing into my chest. I could feel its presence beneath the water, patient and waiting. I turned from the shore, drawing breath deep, the hum fading slowly into the night. The fog swirled, curling around me, soft and cold, and the lake remained endless, dark and untouched. The fog pressed against my skin, heavy and damp. Each step along the shore sank into soft, cold earth. The lake lay still, glassy beneath the pale light of the moon. A faint smell of smoke drifted through the mist. Then something sweeter, flowers I couldn't name, brushed past my nose. Sounds came with it, soft, distant, faint laughter, then crying. I froze, listening. Voices rose and felt like the wind weaving through the reeds. Not my own memories, not my own life, but mine somehow to feel. The fog thickened, curling like fingers around my ankles. It whispered against my ears, brushing words I could not understand. Static hums mingle with the unseen voices, vibrating through my chest. I stepped forward. The ground beneath was slick with dew and shadow. Every footprint filled instantly with mist, erasing itself. A child's laughter floated past. A door creaked. A piano note lingered, distant, hollow, pulling at something deep inside me. The mist shifted, forming vague shapes. Hints of figures, faces I half remembered. They blurred and twisted before my eyes. Smells of old wood and damp stone followed, brushing my fingertips. I tried to reach out, to touch the memory drifting in the fog, but it slipped, intangible, leaving only a tremor in the air. Each breath carried it back, and I inhaled history not my own. Silence pressing suddenly. No voices, no laughter, no crying. Just the fog moving, thick and slow, curling around my chest. Then another sound, softer, intimate. A whisper of a name I didn't know I remembered. It hummed along the water's edge, echoing in the cold night. I shivered. The mist seemed to breathe with me, moving in rhythm with my heartbeat. Every hair on my arms rose, every nerve alert. I wanted to run, but my feet were heavy, rooted in the wet sand. The fog would not let me go. Shapes formed briefly. A woman turning, a man reaching, shadows of lives long gone. Their eyes were hollow, soft with memory. Their smiles flickered, vanishing before I could focus. A low hum rose from the lake, subtle and deep. It vibrated through my bones, through the fog, through the night itself. I felt observed, not by the shapes, but by the past they carried. I stepped back, breathing shallow, the mist curling around my legs. Voices faded, leaving only the smell of damp earth and old smoke. The fog held tight, as if reluctant to release what it carried. I turned, moving away from the lake. The memory-laden fog followed, brushing my shoulders, whispering lightly. Each step brought more questions and answers. The lake remained still, endless, pale light shimmering through the mist. I felt both weightless and trapped, adrift in the silence. The voices lingered behind closed eyes, waiting in the fog. And I realized I was not just walking through the fog. The fog walked through me, carrying fragments of lives I had never lived. It pressed, insistent, soft, and patient. I paused, breathed deep, and the fog curled around me like a shroud, thick and cold. The world shrank to mist and whispers. Every sound, every smell, every shiver of air pressed close. And I walked on alone, carrying fragments that were not mine, into the endless gray. The shoreline was quiet. Fog rolled over the water in slow, heavy waves. Moonlight barely reached through the mist, silvering the edges of reeds. I saw it then, an oar floating alone, pointing toward the deepest part of the lake. The water rippled around it, unnaturally smooth, almost deliberate. It called softly, a quiet hum that pressed against my chest. The air smelled faintly of wet wood and cold metal. I knelt, watching it drift slightly with the current. Each ripple reflected pale light, and something shimmered beneath. I felt a pull, like the lake wanted me to follow. My fingers brushed the water. It was warmer than I expected, vibrating subtly, as if the lake itself breathed beneath my touch. I hesitated. A shiver ran from my neck to my toes. I knew what curiosity could bring here. The oar rocked gently, tilting toward me, then shifted back, pointing deeper still. The mist thickened, curling around my ankles and knees, filling the silence with weight. I leaned closer. Shadows moved beneath the surface, just at the edge of seeing. The lake hummed again, a low, steady vibration. It echoed my heartbeat, quickening with the tide of unease. The water smelled faintly of earth and decay, and beneath it, something older, darker, whispered in patterns I almost recognized. Names I didn't know, but felt deeply echoed in the mist. I took a slow step back. The oar floated forward, relentless, pointing, waiting. Ripples spread outward, distorting the reflection of the moon. It seemed almost to guide me, daring me to move. I could see shapes beneath the surface, tall, distant, unmoving. Eyes I could not focus on watched, pale and still. My hands itched to reach, but dread froze in midair. The mist pressed closer, damp and cold against my skin. Fingers brushing my neck like the touch of something unseen. I thought of turning away, yet the lake's hum lingered in my chest, pulling me forward, gentle but impossible to ignore. The oar drifted nearer, each movement smooth, too precise, like it knew where I should stand, where I should breathe. I knelt again at the edge. Water lapped against my knees, cold and insistent. Ripples formed around the oar, spelling shapes I could not read, then vanished, leaving only stillness. The mist shifted. I could see faint outlines of figures behind it. Silent watchers, motionless, their presence pressing the air tight. A low vibration ran through the ground and into my bones. I swallowed, tasting copper and rain on my tongue. A faint smell of smoke rose from the water, and for a moment I thought the lake was alive, waiting for my choice. The oar paused, floating perfectly still, its tip pointed, unwavering, to the black center of the lake. Everything around me softened. The fog, the reeds, the trembling of the water, all of it waited, patient, silent. I stepped back. The vibration in my chest lingered, the pull of the water tugging at my fingers long after I moved away. The oar remained, solitary, unyielding, pointing into the dark, endless depths. I breathed slowly. Mist curled around me, cold and damp, and I realized the lake did not need my hands. It waited, always. I walked away, feet sinking softly into wet earth, carrying the hum, the pull, the weight of unspoken names with me. The oar stayed behind, floating alone. The moonlight shimmered across the water, and for a long moment I could feel its watchful gaze pressing against my shoulders, patient and eternal. The air was damp, thick with the scent of wet earth and fog. Evening had settled, pale light brushing the treetops. The lake stretched quietly, endless and still. I turned to leave. The shore, it seemed smaller. Trees bent inward, their branches reaching like fingers. Fog curled around my ankles, climbing slowly. It smelled faintly of smoke, of something long buried. The soft rustling of leaves echoed strangely, too deliberate, too slow. Step by step, the land receded. I blinked. What had been solid earth only moments ago now seemed fragile, shrinking beneath me. The hum of the lake rose, low and steady. It pressed against my chest, a heartbeat I could not place. I tried to step back. The ground was gone. Mist swallowed the path behind me. It wrapped around the trunks, thick and damp, filling the spaces between the trees with silence. The lake's surface shimmered pale and infinite. Reflections of the sky twisted into shapes I could not name. I felt a tug, gentle but insistent, like the water wanted me. The trees leaned closer. Shadows stretched and merged, becoming walls of fog. I smelled wet leaves and something sharper, metallic. A breath pressed against my neck. I exhaled slowly. My steps faltered, sinking softly into what remained of the earth. The fog thickened further, curling around my knees, my waist, my shoulders. It whispered, a sound like wind over stone, or voices caught in a room I could not see. The shoreline no longer existed. Where it had been was only water, unbroken, endless. I lifted a hand, reaching for something familiar, but found only mist and the distant, hollow hum of the lake. My chest tightened. A strange calm settled, mixed with the fear that had been trailing me since I first arrived. The hum pulsed in time with my own heartbeat. The trees' silhouettes wavered, bending with the fog, and the reflection of the moon quivered on the surface. I realized then I was not moving backward. The world was moving without me. I let my fingers brush the water. Cold, smooth, alive. Ripples spread outward, swallowing moonlight, and for a heartbeat I thought the lake was endless. I exhaled again, slower this time. Acceptance whispered into the edges of my mind. The land, the trees, the shore I knew, gone. The lake remained, vast and patient. The fog clung to my skin, damp and heavy. I could feel the hum of my bones, soft, steady, eternal. The world I had walked through no longer existed. I took a step forward. Water lapped around my ankles, cool and pressing. Mist curled higher, wrapping me in its quiet embrace. Shadows leaned in from the lake, pale and waiting. The hum became a pulse, and I realized I was not alone. But nothing moved and nothing needed to. I let my hands trail through the water, feeling the weight of everything that had been. Silence and fog pressed against my ears, my eyes, and the lake reflected only me. I exhaled fully, letting go of the shore, the earth, the path behind me. The fog held me. The lake watched. I was alone, and I was ready. The world had vanished. Only the endless water remained, rippling beneath pale moonlight. I stepped further into the quiet, into the hum, into the waiting.